A billionaire CEO took his girlfriend out for dinner, but when he saw his ex-wife pregnant. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The city skyline glittered like a million diamonds outside the tall glass windows of the Silver Oak restaurant. Inside, the atmosphere hummed with quiet luxury. Soft jazz played beneath the low murmur of conversations, and candles flickered between crystal glasses of red wine. Ethan Carter, the billionaire CEO of Carter Holdings, sat at a corner table reserved only for the most powerful names in the city. His suit was tailored to perfection, his cufflinks engraved with his initials, and his expression calm, calculated, untouchable. Across from him sat Vanessa, his current girlfriend, a model with flawless features and an air of practiced charm. She laughed lightly at something he had said, her manicured hand brushing his sleeve. He smiled politely, but his mind was elsewhere. He was used to nights like this, perfect dinners, perfect company, perfect emptiness. When Vanessa lifted her glass to toast, Ethan's gaze drifted past her shoulder toward the entrance. The restaurant doors opened, and in that instant, his world tilted. A woman walked in, her movements careful yet graceful, a soft glow of motherhood surrounding her. She wore a simple beige dress that highlighted her gentle curves, and as the maitre d' led her to a table nearby, Ethan's breath caught in his throat. It was Claire, his ex-wife, the last person he had expected to see tonight. His fingers tightened around his wineglass as memories he had spent 2 years burying surged to the surface. The courthouse, her trembling hands as she signed the divorce papers, the quiet way she had said, "You will regret this someday." He had walked away without looking back. But now, as he watched her sit down, her hand instinctively resting on her rounded belly, he felt the room spin. Vanessa kept talking, unaware that Ethan no longer heard a word. The jazz faded into silence in his ears. All he could see was Claire, pregnant. His pulse pounded. Could it be? He glanced again, and this time Claire's eyes met his. For one suspended heartbeat, neither of them moved. Her expression was unreadable. Shock, perhaps, or pain, but there was no trace of bitterness. Only quiet strength. She quickly looked away, focusing on the menu in front of her, but the slight tremor in her hand did not escape him. Ethan's chest ached with something he could not name. Vanessa reached across the table, snapping him back. "Ethan, are you even listening?" she teased. "You look like you've seen a ghost." He forced a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Just thought I recognized someone," he murmured. But his thoughts were already racing. Claire, here, in the same restaurant, and pregnant? He needed to know. The meal continued, but the taste of the food vanished from his mouth. He watched her discreetly, noticing how she shifted uncomfortably in her chair, as if sitting too long was a strain. The waiter brought her a cup of warm tea, and she thanked him softly. That voice, steady, kind, so familiar, stabbed at his composure. For the first time in years, Ethan Carter felt something crack through his polished armor. It was guilt, it was longing, and it was the beginning of everything he could never undo. The clinking of silverware and the soft hum of conversations filled the elegant restaurant, but for Ethan Carter, everything had gone silent. His eyes lingered on Claire, who sat only a few tables away, her profile framed by the warm glow of candlelight. She looked different, calmer, softer, but also stronger than he remembered. The last time he had seen her, she had been crying in a courthouse hallway, clutching her divorce papers with shaking hands. Tonight, there were no tears, only quiet dignity. Vanessa's laughter pulled him back for a moment. "Ethan, you really are distracted tonight," she said, her voice playful but edged with annoyance. He offered a faint apology, claiming he was tired from meetings, but his gaze kept drifting. Every time he looked, Claire was there, and every time he felt a sharp ache in his chest. His mind replayed their final argument 2 years ago. She had begged him to slow down, to come home before midnight, to remember that there was more to life than money and boardrooms. He had told her she was holding him back. He had said things he could never take back. When she finally left, she did not ask for alimony or property. She had simply said, "I do not need your wealth, Ethan. I just need peace." Now, looking at her hand resting gently over her pregnant belly, Ethan wondered if she had found it. Vanessa noticed his distant stare and turned her head. "Who is that woman you keep looking at?" she asked lightly, though her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Ethan hesitated for a long second before replying, "Just someone I used to know." "Used to?" she pressed. "An ex?" He forced a half smile. "Something like that." Vanessa raised an eyebrow but did not push further. She was smart enough to sense the tension in his voice. Still, curiosity glimmered in her eyes as she glanced toward Claire. "Well, she looks happy," she said, her tone casual but sharp beneath the surface. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yes," he said quietly, "she does." The dinner dragged on. Vanessa scrolled through her phone between courses, occasionally snapping pictures of the food for her social media. Ethan barely touched his steak. His mind was miles away, replaying flashes of the life he had lost. Sunday mornings filled with laughter and burnt pancakes. Claire's paint-stained hands as she worked on her art studio project. The way she used to hum absent-mindedly while cleaning the kitchen. And the way she had once looked at him with hope, not judgment. When the waiter brought the check, Vanessa was already reapplying her lipstick. "Ready to go?" she asked, her tone brisk. "Actually," Ethan said, his voice low, "I need a minute. You go ahead. I will meet you outside." Vanessa blinked in surprise, clearly unused to being dismissed, but she gathered her purse and stood. "Fine, but do not take too long," she said, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she left. Ethan waited until she disappeared through the glass doors before rising from his seat. His pulse quickened as he approached Claire's table. She looked up as his shadow fell across the linen. For a brief second, recognition flared in her eyes, followed by hesitation. "Ethan," she said softly, his name falling from her lips like a memory. "It has been a long time." "2 years," he replied. His voice was calm, but inside he felt the tremor of regret. "You look well." "I am," she said simply. Her hand never left her belly. The waiter returned with her check, and she reached for her purse, but Ethan stopped him. "I will take care of it," he said. Claire shook her head immediately. "That will not be necessary." "Please," he insisted. "It is just dinner." "Ethan," she said firmly, meeting his eyes, "I can pay for myself now." There was no anger in her tone, only quiet pride. He nodded slowly, realizing how different she was, how much stronger. "Is it?" He hesitated, glancing at her stomach. "Is it yours to ask?" she said with a faint, bittersweet smile. "No, Ethan, you lost the right to ask me anything when you walked away." Her words struck deeper than any accusation could. He opened his mouth but found nothing to say. Claire rose carefully, adjusting her coat. "Take care of yourself," she said gently. Then she turned and walked out into the night, leaving him standing in the golden light of the restaurant, surrounded by everything money could buy and haunted by the one thing it never could. Outside, through the glass, he watched her step into a cab, her silhouette framed against the city lights. For the first time in years, Ethan Carter realized what true poverty felt like. It was not the absence of wealth, it was the absence of love. The night air outside the Silver Oak restaurant was cool and heavy with the faint scent of rain. Ethan stood on the sidewalk, his hands buried in the pockets of his coat, watching the cab disappear into the maze of city lights. Claire's words echoed in his head, quiet but relentless. "You lost the right to ask me anything when you walked away." He'd heard 1,000 business negotiations end in harsher tones, but nothing had ever felt this final. Vanessa's voice broke through his haze as she approached, her heels sharp against the pavement. "So that was her, wasn't it?" she asked. He turned to her, startled. "Her who?" "Your ex-wife," she said flatly. "You could not take your eyes off her all night." Ethan exhaled slowly. "It is over between us," he said, but the lie tasted bitter. Vanessa studied him for a moment, then shrugged. "You know what, Ethan? You can have your ghosts. I prefer the living." She waved down a passing car and left without another word. Ethan did not stop her. He simply stood there, watching the rain begin to fall, small silver drops catching in the streetlight. It was late when he finally drove home, but the city refused to sleep. He took the long route, passing through streets he had not visited since before the divorce. The familiar landmarks of their old life together felt haunting now: the little bookstore where Claire used to spend hours, the park bench where they once planned their future. By the time he reached his penthouse, the storm had grown stronger. Lightning flickered across the skyline as he stepped inside the empty apartment. Every surface gleamed, every object in its perfect place. But the silence pressed down on him like a weight. He loosened his tie and walked to the large window overlooking the city. His reflection stared back at him, a man with everything and nothing. He remembered the day Claire had left. She had packed her small suitcase quietly, without shouting or tears. When he asked if she was sure, she had simply said, "You stopped seeing me a long time ago, Ethan." He had not followed her then. Pride had told him to let her go. Tonight, pride felt like a curse. The next morning, Ethan arrived at his office earlier than usual. His assistant, Julia, looked up in surprise. "Good morning, sir. You are in before the board." He nodded absently. "Cancel my morning meetings. I need to take care of something." "Of course," she replied, though curiosity flickered in her eyes. Ethan sat behind his desk, staring at the framed photo that had somehow remained on his shelf, a picture from a charity gala years ago, when he and Claire had been newly married. They were smiling, hands intertwined, unaware of how fragile that happiness truly was. He traced the edge of the frame with his thumb. Then he picked up the phone. It took several calls and a few favors, but by noon he had her address. She lived in a modest townhouse on the quieter side of the city. The neighborhood was simple, clean, filled with small gardens and families walking their dogs. It was a world far from his polished corporate empire. He parked across the street, unsure of what he was doing there. Through the window, he could see Claire arranging flowers in a vase. Her movements were slow, careful. She seemed content. For a long moment, he just watched her, the way he used to before life got too busy for simple things. Then, as if sensing his gaze, she looked toward the window. Their eyes met even through the glass, and Ethan froze. She did not smile. She simply drew the curtain closed. Ethan leaned back in his seat, the rejection subtle but absolute. He sat there until the sun began to dip, the sky painted in shades of gold and gray. When he finally started the car, he told himself it was the last time he would come here. But as he drove away, a question gnawed at him like an open wound. Who was the father of her child? And why did it matter so much to him if his chapter with her was supposed to be closed? In his heart, he already knew the answer. It mattered because despite everything he had said, despite every cruel word and every missed chance, he had never truly stopped loving her. Rain swept across the city for the next several days, blurring the skyline into shades of silver and gray. Ethan buried himself in work, trying to lose the memory of that night, but every quiet moment betrayed him. Claire's face, her voice, her calm strength, they followed him through boardrooms and into dreams. By Friday afternoon, he could no longer focus. His assistant Julia knocked on the door. "Sir, the quarterly report is ready for review." Ethan looked up from his untouched coffee. "Leave it on the desk. I will look at it later." She hesitated, then said softly, "Sir, you have not missed a report in 10 years. He gave a faint smile. "There is a first time for everything." When she left, he stood by the window again, watching the rain bead against the glass. He had built his empire on logic and control, but now emotion was undoing him. He reached for his car keys. Minutes later, his black sedan was weaving through the quiet streets toward the neighborhood he swore he would not return to. When he parked this time, he saw a small blue car in the driveway, and through the curtain, the soft glow of a lamp. He sat there for nearly 20 minutes before gathering the courage to step out. His shoes splashed against puddles as he crossed the street. He hesitated at her door, then knocked. The sound was timid, nothing like the confident CEO the world knew. The door opened halfway, revealing Claire in a simple sweater and jeans. She looked tired but peaceful, and in her hands she held a cup of tea that steamed gently in the cool air. "Ethan," she said quietly, as though she had expected this. "What are you doing here?" He swallowed hard. "I needed to see you, just to talk." "About what?" "About everything I never said." Her eyes softened, but she did not invite him in. "You said plenty when you signed those papers." He nodded, guilt tightening in his throat. "I know, but seeing you the other night was an accident," she interrupted gently. "That part of our lives is over." "Is it?" he asked. "You are carrying a child, Claire. I cannot help wondering." "Stop," she said firmly. "Do not go there. My life does not revolve around your curiosity anymore." Her voice was calm, but her knuckles whitened around the teacup. Ethan's heart pounded. "Then tell me it is not mine," he said softly. She looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "You always think everything belongs to you, Ethan, even people." She set the cup down on the small table by the door. "I am not here to hurt you," he continued. "I just need to understand." "Understand what?" she asked. "Why you could not love me when I needed you, but now that I have finally moved on, you suddenly remember my name." The question hit him like a blade. "I never stopped loving you," he said. "I just forgot how to show it." Claire's expression shifted from anger to sorrow. "That is the tragedy of men like you. You think love is something you can pause and resume when convenient. But people do not wait forever." A small silence fell between them, broken only by the sound of rain tapping the porch roof. Ethan's voice trembled. "If I have made mistakes, let me make them right." "Some mistakes," she said softly, "are not meant to be fixed. They are meant to be learned from." She began to close the door, but he stopped it gently with his hand. "Claire, please, just tell me." "Goodbye, Ethan." The door shut with a quiet finality that felt louder than any slammed one. He stood there, soaked by the rain, staring at the wood grain of the door that separated him from everything he had lost. The porch light flickered, casting his shadow long across the wet pavement. He whispered to no one, "I deserve this." Then he turned, walking slowly back to his car. As he started the engine, a faint movement caught his eye in the rearview mirror. Through the upstairs window, the curtain shifted, and for a fleeting second, he saw Claire's silhouette watching him leave. The image stayed with him long after he drove away, and for the first time in years, Ethan Carter felt something he had not felt since his youth. Not anger, not pride, but the hollow ache of a man finally facing his own humanity. The following week moved with the rhythm of a restless heart. Ethan buried himself in work, holding longer meetings, signing endless documents, pretending everything was fine. But even the thick walls of Carter Holdings could not shut out the memory of Claire's voice at the door. Every night he replayed it in his mind, word by word. Some mistakes are not meant to be fixed. Those words had burned deeper than any business failure. On Thursday morning, he sat in his office staring at the city skyline, but the view did not bring him pride anymore. His assistant Julia entered quietly, holding a folder. "Sir, the press wants a statement about your attendance at the upcoming charity gala." Ethan nodded absently. "Tell them I will be there." Julia hesitated. "That is the event supporting the community maternity center, correct?" He looked up at her tone. "Yes. Why?" "No reason," she said quickly. But when she left, a strange thought formed in his mind. The maternity center. He had donated to it years ago when he and Claire were still married. She had loved that cause, always volunteering to help single mothers and young families. Ethan's heart tightened. What if she was involved again? Against his better judgment, he decided to attend. Saturday night arrived with glitter and music. The hotel ballroom glowed under chandeliers, full of laughter and champagne. Ethan arrived alone, dressed in a simple black suit that somehow felt heavier than any armor. People greeted him with smiles. Reporters asked for photos, but he barely heard them. Then, across the room, he saw her. Claire, she was standing by the donation table, speaking softly with one of the organizers. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and her hand rested lightly on her growing belly. She looked radiant like peace in human form. Ethan stood frozen, torn between pride and pain. He had once thought success was measured in applause and recognition. Now he realized that true strength was standing there in a woman who had rebuilt her life without him. Before he could move, the event coordinator stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "please join me in welcoming Claire Bennett, who has been instrumental in organizing this fundraiser. Her dedication to supporting women and children in need has inspired us all." Applause filled the room. Ethan clapped automatically, his heart pounding. Claire smiled modestly and took the stage. Her voice was steady and kind. "Thank you. When we talk about strength, we often picture power, wealth, or control. But real strength is quiet. It is the single mother who gets up before dawn, the father who learns to be gentle, the person who chooses kindness, even when life has been unkind." Ethan's throat tightened. Every word felt aimed directly at him. She continued, "This center represents hope for those who feel forgotten, because everyone deserves a second chance, even if it looks different from what they imagined." The audience erupted in applause again, but Ethan stood motionless. When the event ended, he waited near the exit. As Claire walked by, she stopped briefly, surprised to see him. "You came," she said softly. "I did," he replied. "You were wonderful up there," she smiled faintly. "It was not about being wonderful. It was about giving back. You always gave more than anyone," he said quietly. She glanced around. "Ethan, please do not make a scene." "I am not here to make a scene," he said. "I just wanted to say that I am proud of you." She blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. "Thank you," she said after a pause. "That means something." For a heartbeat, the noise of the crowd faded. Then someone called her name, and she turned to leave. Ethan watched her walk away again, but this time there was something different in her step, grace, confidence, and the quiet strength of a woman who no longer needed saving. As the ballroom lights dimmed, Ethan stood alone among the glitter and laughter, realizing that redemption did not always come with forgiveness. Sometimes it came with understanding what you had destroyed and learning to live with it. The following morning came with a restless sky. Grey clouds drifted over the city, heavy with the promise of rain, and Ethan sat alone in his kitchen, staring at the cold cup of coffee in front of him. He had not slept much after the charity event. Claire's speech had replayed in his mind over and over, her voice calm and unwavering, her message like a quiet sermon to his soul. He had watched her stand on that stage with grace, surrounded by applause, and realized that the woman he had once broken had rebuilt herself into someone stronger. He admired her more now than ever, and that realization hurt in a way success never could. At 9 o'clock, his phone buzzed with messages from his board members and investors, but he ignored them. Instead, he reached for his car keys again, driven by something deeper than logic. He needed to see her, not to interfere, not to demand, but to understand what her life had become without him. The small maternity center was alive with quiet movement when he arrived. Volunteers carried boxes of donated supplies, nurses spoke softly in the hallway, and the sound of gentle laughter floated from one of the rooms. Ethan stepped inside, his polished shoes suddenly feeling out of place on the worn linoleum floor. A young receptionist looked up from her desk. "Good morning, sir. Can I help you?" "I am looking for Claire Bennett," he said. The woman smiled. "She is in the East Wing, helping with prenatal classes. You can wait in the lobby if you like." He thanked her and found a seat near the window. From where he sat, he could see through a small glass panel into the adjoining room. Claire stood among a group of expectant mothers, guiding them through gentle breathing exercises. Her tone was warm and encouraging, her movements graceful. The women laughed when she made a light joke about first-time nerves. Ethan felt something stir in him, something that had nothing to do with regret or pride. It was awe. When the class ended, Claire stepped into the hall and saw him. Surprise flickered across her face, followed by resignation. "Ethan," she said quietly, walking over. "You should not be here." "I know," he said. "I just wanted to see what you have built. It is remarkable." "This place is not mine," she replied. "It belongs to the community. I am just one of many who help." "Still," he said softly, "it feels like you gave it a heartbeat." She looked down, embarrassed by the sincerity in his voice. "You have changed," she said finally. "Maybe," he admitted. "Or maybe I am just starting to see clearly." They stood in silence for a moment. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall against the window. "You should go," she said gently. "This part of my life is peaceful. I would like to keep it that way." He nodded. "I will not disturb you again." She hesitated before speaking. "Ethan, I do not hate you. I never did. I just stopped waiting for you to be the man I believed you could be." Her words struck him deeper than anger ever could. "I am sorry," he said. "I know that is not enough, but I am." She gave him a small, sad smile. "It is a start, but apologies do not erase consequences." He wanted to say more, to ask about the baby, but the gentle firmness in her eyes told him that boundary was not his to cross. So he nodded once more and turned to leave. As he walked out into the rain, he caught sight of a mural painted on the outer wall of the center. It showed a tree with roots spreading deep into the earth, its branches reaching toward a bright sky. Underneath, in small letters, were the words, "From broken soil, new life grows." He stood there for a long time, rain soaking his coat, reading those words again and again. For the first time in years, Ethan Carter felt something close to humility. He realized that perhaps redemption was not something you claimed. It was something you earned slowly, quietly, through the small ways you chose to be better when no one was watching. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet rhythm of autumn began to settle over the city. Ethan tried to focus on work again, but something inside him had changed. He no longer felt the rush that came from closing a deal or watching stock numbers rise. Meetings that used to excite him now felt empty. Every morning, he passed the mirror in his penthouse and barely recognized the man staring back. The sharp confidence was gone, replaced by something softer, something heavier. One evening, after a long day at the office, Ethan stopped by a bookstore downtown. He had not been inside one since the years with Claire. Back then, she could spend hours wandering through the aisles, running her fingers over the spines of novels as if each one held a secret. He remembered teasing her about buying too many books and her reply, "You cannot put a price on stories that make you feel alive." That memory warmed and hurt at the same time. As he browsed absent-mindedly, his phone buzzed with a message from Julia, his assistant. "Sir, there was a call for you from the community maternity center. They said it was important." His chest tightened. Without waiting, he called back. The receptionist recognized his voice immediately. "Mr. Carter, this is Liora from the center. I apologize for calling, but Miss Bennett is at County Hospital. She had some complications earlier today. She is stable now, but we thought you should know." The words blurred in his ears. "Thank you," he managed to say before ending the call. Within minutes, he was in his car, the city lights streaking past as he drove faster than he ever had before. When he reached the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air. The nurse at the desk gave him directions to the maternity ward. His footsteps echoed down the long corridor, each one pounding with fear. When he reached the room, he saw Claire through the glass window resting, pale but breathing steadily. Relief washed over him, but it was quickly replaced by guilt. He had no right to be here, yet every instinct told him he needed to stay. The nurse noticed him standing there. "Are you family?" she asked. Ethan hesitated before answering. "Not exactly," he said, "but I would like to make sure she has everything she needs." The nurse smiled kindly. "She is doing well now. The baby is strong. We are keeping her overnight for observation." The word baby made his heart stumble. He thanked the nurse quietly and sat in the waiting area. The clock on the wall ticked softly as hours passed. Memories filled the silence, her laughter echoing through their old apartment, her quiet hum while cooking, the warmth of her hand when they used to walk together. Around midnight, the door opened and Claire's doctor stepped out. Ethan stood immediately. "How is she?" "She is stable," the doctor said. "A little stress, a little exhaustion, but she and the baby are both safe. She needs rest and calm." Ethan nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "Can I see her?" "She is asleep right now," the doctor replied. "Perhaps in the morning." Ethan thanked him and remained there, refusing to leave. Through the small window, he could see Claire's peaceful face, illuminated by the soft light above her bed. She looked fragile and strong at the same time. For the first time in years, he prayed not for wealth, not for success, but for her safety. As dawn began to break, painting the hospital walls with pale gold, Ethan finally closed his eyes. When he woke, Claire was awake too, watching him through the glass. Their eyes met, and though she did not smile, there was no anger in her gaze, only quiet understanding. She lifted her hand slightly, a small gesture that seemed to say, "You can go now." He nodded, respecting her silent request. As he walked out of the hospital, the morning sun felt warmer than it had in months. For the first time, Ethan Carter understood that love was not about possession or redemption. Sometimes, it was simply about showing up when it mattered most. The morning after Claire's hospital stay began with sunlight filtering through the window blinds. She was sitting up in bed, her hair slightly messy, her hand resting gently over her stomach. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and roses from a bouquet someone had sent. When the nurse came in with her breakfast tray, she smiled warmly. "You had a visitor last night," she said. He stayed the whole time in the waiting area. Claire froze for a moment, her heart skipping. "Ethan," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The nurse nodded. "He left around sunrise, said he just wanted to make sure you were safe." Claire looked down at her hands, unsure how to feel. For so long, she had convinced herself she had moved on completely, that she no longer needed anything from him. But hearing that he had waited, quietly, without asking for anything, it stirred something deep within her. A few hours later, after she was discharged, she walked outside into the crisp autumn air. The hospital parking lot shimmered with the last traces of rain. She did not expect to see him there, but he was leaning against his car, hands in his pockets, as if afraid to come closer. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, he stepped forward. "I'm glad you are all right," he said softly. "The doctor said it was just exhaustion." She nodded. "You did not have to stay, Ethan." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." There was no arrogance in his tone, no expectation, just sincerity. Claire sighed. "I do not know what you are trying to prove." "Nothing," he replied. "I just needed to know that you and the baby are safe." His voice trembled slightly on the word baby. She looked at him carefully. "You think it is yours, do you not?" "I do not know," he admitted. "And maybe it does not matter. I would still want to make sure you have everything you need." Her heart tightened at that. "You cannot fix the past by throwing money at it, Ethan." He shook his head. "This is not about money. I know I cannot buy my way back into your life. I just want to be useful, somehow." For the first time, she saw something unfamiliar in his face. Not pride, not charm, but humility. She exhaled slowly. "Ethan, you were always a man of grand gestures, but sometimes life is about the small things, the quiet moments, the ordinary kindnesses." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I am learning that." Claire adjusted her scarf and took a small step closer. "I appreciate that you came last night, truly, but you cannot keep waiting outside my world. You have your own life to live." "I know," he said quietly, "but even if we never speak again, I want you to know that I am proud of who you have become." Something in his voice softened the air between them. For the first time in years, Claire believed him. She smiled faintly. "Goodbye, Ethan." She turned to leave, but before she reached her car, he called after her. "Claire?" She paused, looking back. "Yes?" He hesitated before speaking. "If you ever need anything at all, please call me. Not because I owe you, but because I care." She gave a small nod. "Take care of yourself, Ethan." And then she drove away, the autumn leaves swirling in her wake. Ethan stood there long after her car disappeared, the silence around him heavy but strangely peaceful. For once, he did not feel the urge to chase, to fix, or to demand. He simply stood still, breathing in the cool air, accepting the quiet truth that some stories did not end with reunion or forgiveness. Some ended with understanding. As the wind brushed through his hair, he whispered to himself, "Maybe this is what redemption feels like, not being loved again, but learning how to love right, even from a distance." And for the first time in a long time, Ethan Carter felt free. Winter arrived quietly, blanketing the city in soft grey light. Weeks had passed since that morning outside the hospital, and Ethan had not seen Claire again. He respected her distance, but his thoughts lingered on her more often than he cared to admit. He found himself driving slower past the maternity center on his way to work, glancing at the building through his window, wondering how she was doing. Life at Carter Holdings continued as usual, but for the first time, Ethan began making small changes. He reduced his hours, donated to charities quietly, and started visiting local schools to mentor young entrepreneurs. Julia, his assistant, noticed the shift. "You seem different, sir," she said one afternoon as she handed him a report. "I suppose I am," he replied. "I spent too long trying to be someone I am not." That night, after a long board meeting, Ethan drove home through the snowfall. The city lights shimmered against the icy pavement. When he arrived at his apartment, a small envelope was waiting in the lobby with his name written in delicate handwriting. Inside was a short note. "Ethan, thank you for helping with the center's fundraiser. We received your anonymous donation. It means a lot. The baby and I are doing well. Claire." He read the note several times, his chest tightening with a mix of relief and longing. For the first time, she had reached out. It was small, but to him, it felt monumental. Over the next few months, their communication remained brief but polite messages about the center's progress, updates about her health. He never pushed for more. Each time her name appeared on his phone, it was enough to bring quiet warmth into his day. One snowy afternoon in February, Ethan stopped by the community center unannounced. He brought a box of books and art supplies for the children's program. As he was setting them down, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "You always did have a thing for grand gestures," Claire said softly. He turned, startled but smiling. "You caught me," he said. "I was hoping to leave them before anyone noticed." "You could have just sent them," she said, though her tone was gentle. "I wanted to see this place again," he admitted. And maybe see you. Claire folded her hands, watching him. You seem calmer, she said, less like the man who thought the world needed to bend to his will. That man does not exist anymore, Ethan replied quietly. He lost too much to stay the same. For a moment, the tension between them eased. She smiled faintly, her eyes softer than before. The children will love these, she said, nodding at the boxes. Thank you. He looked around the center, at the bright murals and the laughter echoing down the hall. You built something beautiful here, he said. Something that matters. It is not just me, she replied. It is a community, people who care. He hesitated before speaking again. Claire, I do not expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know that if you ever need support, in any way, you can count on me. She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. You already gave me something, she said finally. You gave me closure. The words were simple, but they landed deep in his heart. If that is all I can give, then I am grateful, he said. Claire's gaze softened. Ethan, the past cannot be erased, but it does not have to define you. You are allowed to be better. He nodded slowly. I am trying. Good, she said. Keep trying. Then she turned toward the hallway, her hand brushing lightly against the wall as she walked away. Ethan watched her go, his chest filled with something that was not pain but quiet peace. For the first time in years, he did not feel the need to chase her. Instead, he felt thankful that she had found happiness even if it did not include him. As he left the center, the snow began to fall heavier, coating the city in white. Ethan looked up at the sky, letting the flakes land on his face, and whispered to himself, maybe love was never about winning. Maybe it was about learning to let go with grace. Spring arrived with soft winds and early sunlight. The city began to bloom again, and so did something quiet inside Ethan Carter. He had learned to live with stillness, to find meaning in small things, a morning walk without his phone, a simple meal without meetings. He had stopped counting achievements and started counting moments. Yet, sometimes, in the quiet of his apartment, he still thought about Claire, not with longing, but with a kind of gratitude. She had been both his greatest loss and his greatest lesson. One evening, as he reviewed some charity reports, his phone rang. The caller ID made his heart skip. It was the community maternity center. When he answered, it was the same receptionist, Liora. Mr. Carter, I am sorry to bother you, she said, but Miss Bennett went into labor earlier today. Everything is fine so far, but she asked that someone bring a few personal things from her office here. You are listed as her emergency contact. Ethan froze. Her emergency contact? Yes, sir. She filled out the form a few months ago. You are the only name. His throat tightened. I will bring them right away. He arrived at the center within 20 minutes, his heart racing. Liora handed him a small bag. She will be at County Hospital again. Room 12, maternity wing. He thanked her and left immediately. The drive felt endless. When he reached the hospital, the familiar smell of antiseptic hit him again, along with the hum of quiet urgency. The nurse at the desk recognized his name and directed him to the room. Through the glass, he saw Claire resting, pale but smiling, a tiny newborn in her arms. The sight rooted him to the floor. He had seen billions of dollars move through his hands, but nothing compared to the fragile power of that moment. He knocked softly before entering. Claire looked up, tired but calm. You came, she whispered. They called me, he said gently. You wrote my name down. She gave a faint smile. I guess a part of me still trusted you when it mattered. He stepped closer, his voice trembling. Is it? She looked down at the baby and then back at him. Yes, Ethan, she is yours. The words hit him like light breaking through clouds. His breath caught, his eyes burning. She is beautiful, he said softly. Just like her mother. Claire's expression softened. Would you like to hold her? He hesitated, afraid his hands were not worthy, but Claire nodded encouragingly. Slowly, she placed the baby into his arms. The tiny warmth against his chest shattered every wall he had built. The baby's fingers curled around his thumb, and for the first time in his life, Ethan Carter cried without shame. I do not deserve this, he whispered. Claire's eyes glistened. Maybe not, but she deserves to know her father. He nodded, unable to speak. They sat there in silence, the three of them, wrapped in the fragile peace of a second chance neither had planned. After a while, Claire spoke again. I do not expect us to be what we were, But if you mean what you said about learning, about trying, then maybe we can build something new for her. Ethan looked at the baby, then at Claire. I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you, he said. Not with words, with actions. Claire smiled, tired but genuine. That is all I ask. As the evening sun streamed through the hospital window, Ethan felt something shift inside him. The world, once cold and calculated, suddenly felt alive. He finally understood that redemption did not come from grand gestures or apologies. It came from holding something fragile and choosing, every day, not to let it break. And for the first time in years, Ethan Carter felt whole. The days following the birth of the baby moved like a slow dream. The hospital room smelled faintly of lavender and new beginnings. Ethan visited every day, careful not to overstep, sitting quietly near the window while Claire rested. The baby, a tiny girl with dark eyes and soft hair, had already changed everything. Ethan could not stop staring at her, memorizing every small breath, every sound. Each time she reached for his finger, he felt something shift deeper inside him, a healing he had never thought possible. Claire watched him with a quiet curiosity. She had seen Ethan command boardrooms and negotiate with ruthless precision, but this version of him was different. He spoke softly, moved carefully, and when he held their daughter, his entire body seemed to exhale. One afternoon, a week after the birth, Claire looked at him and said, "You can hold her again if you want." Ethan smiled, grateful for the invitation. As he cradled the baby, he whispered, "Your father used to think the world revolved around success, but now it revolves around this." Claire tilted her head, studying him. "You really have changed." "You were right," he said softly, "about everything. I built an empire and lost myself in it. I forgot what mattered." She looked down at her hands. "People can forget. The hard part is remembering in time." Ethan nodded. "I do not expect forgiveness. I just want to do right by her." "That is a start," she said quietly. "She will need you to be present, not perfect." The words stayed with him long after he left the hospital. Over the next few weeks, he rearranged his life completely. He turned down social events, delegated more responsibilities, and scheduled time every evening to visit Claire and the baby. Julia noticed the change immediately. "You are leaving early again?" she asked one night, half smiling. "Yes," he said simply. "I have somewhere more important to be." At first, the visits were short, just enough time to hold the baby and talk with Claire, but soon they became longer, filled with laughter, shared stories, and a fragile sense of peace. Claire was cautious, still guarding her heart, but she could not deny that the man sitting in her living room was no longer the one who had once walked away. One evening, as the baby slept between them in a small crib, Claire said quietly, "Her name is Grace." Ethan's breath caught. "Grace," he repeated, tasting the word like something sacred. "It is perfect. It is what I found after losing everything," Claire said softly. He looked at her, realizing that she did not just mean herself, she meant him too. The silence that followed was not awkward but full of understanding. After a moment, Ethan said, "If you ever need help financially or otherwise, please do not hesitate." Claire smiled faintly. "I will not need money, Ethan, but I will not refuse help if it comes with good intention." "Then you will have both," he said. As he left that night, he stood for a moment on the porch, listening to the faint sound of the baby's breathing from inside. The air was cool, the sky clear, and for once he felt content, not knowing what tomorrow held. Over the following months, he kept his promise. He was there for every milestone: the baby's first smile, the first time she grabbed his tie and refused to let go, the quiet afternoons when Claire would nap and he would rock Grace to sleep. Each small moment stitched together something inside him that had been broken for years. He no longer needed power to feel significant. All he needed was the weight of his daughter in his arms and the quiet trust in Claire's eyes when she handed Grace to him. For the first time, Ethan Carter understood what legacy truly meant. It was not about what he left behind, but about who he learned to love while he still had the chance. The following year unfolded quietly, marked by the steady rhythm of new life. Ethan Carter had become a familiar presence in Claire's world. Though he moved carefully, never crossing boundaries, she had not opened herself. Every weekend he visited their daughter, Grace, whose laughter had become the soundtrack of his days. He learned to change diapers, prepare bottles, and sing lullabies off-key until she fell asleep on his chest. The once untouchable CEO now spent evenings on the floor stacking toy blocks, completely content when Grace knocked them over and giggled. Claire watched him, often in silence, her heart caught between caution and warmth. The man before her was not the one she had divorced. This version of Ethan carried humility in his posture and sincerity in his voice. There were moments when she caught him staring at their daughter with tears in his eyes, and she knew the change was real. Still, she kept a quiet distance. Forgiveness was a process, not a single moment. One afternoon, while Ethan was feeding Grace in the garden, Claire brought out 2 cups of coffee. The sunlight filtered through the trees, painting golden spots across the grass. "She adores you," Claire said, sitting beside him. "She adores both of us," he replied with a smile. "I do not think I ever understood what unconditional love felt like until now." Claire looked at him thoughtfully. "You are different, Ethan, but I wonder if life had not forced you to change, would you have?" He paused before answering. "Maybe not," he admitted. "Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what truly matters." She nodded slowly, her gaze softening. "At least you learned, before it was too late." He smiled faintly. "That is because you never gave up on doing what was right, even when I failed you." The sound of Grace's laughter filled the silence that followed. Claire took a sip of her coffee. "I did not do it for you," she said gently. "I did it because she deserved better." "She does," Ethan agreed. "And so do you." Claire looked down, hiding a small smile. Over the next few months, their friendship grew naturally. They shared dinners, celebrated Grace's first birthday together, and even took short walks as a family through the park. Ethan never rushed anything, never asked for more than she was ready to give. Instead, he showed up consistently, quietly, with love that expected nothing in return. One evening, as Claire put Grace to bed, Ethan waited on the porch, watching the stars appear. When she joined him, the air between them felt peaceful. "Do you ever think about us?" he asked softly. Claire did not answer right away. "Sometimes," she said finally, "but it is different now. The pain does not hurt as sharply. It just feels like history." Ethan nodded, accepting the truth without resistance. "If all we are now is history," he said, "then I am grateful it ended with peace." She looked at him, her eyes shining with something unspoken. "Peace is more than most people get," she said quietly. They stood there for a long moment, listening to the soft hum of the night. Then Claire reached out and touched his hand gently. "You have done well, Ethan," she said. "I think you finally found yourself." He looked at her, emotion catching in his throat. "You were the one who showed me where to look." A light breeze moved through the trees, carrying with it the faint sound of Grace stirring in her crib. Claire smiled softly. "Go check on her," she said. Ethan nodded and stepped inside, his heart full. As he watched his daughter sleep peacefully, he realized that redemption had not come in one grand act of forgiveness, but through 1,000 small moments of love, patience, and honesty. For the first time in his life, Ethan Carter understood that being a father, a man, and a human being were all the same thing: to love without control, to give without expectation, and to be present for the ones who still believed in him. The years passed quietly, marked not by board meetings or business awards, but by birthdays, bedtime stories, and small miracles. Ethan Carter had long stopped counting profits. His greatest investment now was time spent watching his daughter grow, time learning to listen, time learning that love did not demand recognition. Grace had his eyes and Claire's spirit, fearless and full of light. Every time she laughed, the sound seemed to erase another piece of the man Ethan used to be. He no longer lived in the tall glass apartment overlooking the city. Instead, he moved to a modest home closer to Claire and the community center. His mornings began with coffee and laughter instead of conference calls. Sometimes, he would still visit the headquarters, offering guidance to the younger executives, but he always left early, saying with a smile, "My daughter runs a tighter schedule than this company ever will." Claire often teased him about it, but there was affection in her tone now, not distance. They had found a rhythm, two people bound not by romance, but by something steadier, deeper, and far more sacred. One afternoon, as spring painted the world in green again, Ethan stood in the backyard watching Grace chase butterflies. Claire came out carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. "She gets her stubbornness from you," Claire said, sitting beside him on the porch. He chuckled softly. "And her kindness from you." They sat in silence, comfortable, and calm. The years had softened them both. Time, once their enemy, had become their quiet ally. "Do you ever regret how it all happened?" Claire asked suddenly, her voice gentle. Ethan thought for a long moment. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I regret the years I wasted, the love I took for granted, but I do not regret where it brought us. Without those mistakes, I might never have learned who I am meant to be." She nodded slowly. "I suppose pain has its own purpose." He looked at her, the sunlight reflecting in her eyes. "If I could go back, I would do it all differently," he said. "But since I cannot, I will just keep doing better from here." Claire smiled, a real, warm smile that reached her eyes. "You already are, Ethan. You have been for a long time." At that moment, Grace ran up to them, clutching a small yellow flower. "Look, Daddy," she said proudly. "I picked this for you." Ethan took it carefully, his heart swelling. "Thank you, sweetheart. It is beautiful." He turned to Claire. "Everything I ever needed is right here." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of redemption. Later that evening, as the sky turned golden, Ethan tucked Grace into bed. She looked up at him sleepily and asked, "Daddy, were you always this happy?" He smiled and brushed her hair from her forehead. "No, honey," he said softly, "but I learned how to be." She yawned, whispering, "Because of me and Mommy?" "Because of love," he replied. "Because love gives you a second chance if you are brave enough to take it." When she drifted off to sleep, Ethan stood for a long while, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. In that quiet room, he felt something sacred, a peace that came not from success or forgiveness, but from understanding. Life had not given him what he wanted, but it had given him what he needed. As he turned off the light and stepped outside, Claire was waiting by the door. "She asked if you were always this happy," Ethan said with a small smile. Claire laughed softly. "What did you tell her?" "That I am now." She looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "Good," she said. They stood together under the starlit sky, not as the broken couple they once were, but as two whole people who had learned how to love without pride. The night was calm, the air warm, and somewhere inside, Ethan Carter finally understood that some endings are not about loss, they are about peace. And peace, he realized, is just another word for grace. In a world where love and power collide, this emotional journey follows a billionaire CEO who learns that true wealth is not measured by money but by forgiveness, redemption, and second chances. Inspired by the heart of millionaire stories, it tells of a man who once lost everything chasing success but found his soul again through the quiet strength of the woman he hurt and the daughter who taught him how to love. Filled with tenderness, moral depth, and cinematic emotion, this narrative brings the human side of luxury to life, reminding viewers that not all millionaire stories are about riches, some are about becoming rich in heart. As the story unfolds, it captures the healing between former lovers, the rediscovery of fatherhood, and the power of humility, making it one of those rare millionaire stories that redefine what it means to be truly fulfilled. For anyone who believes in redemption and timeless love, this tale stands as a modern masterpiece among millionaire stories, proving that grace, not gold, is life's greatest treasure.